Greetings and salutations, everybody. I am already starting out my video a mess. Hang on, timeout. I got it. I have it. I have it now. So this is my quick review of Tamarak Trail, the upcoming title by Versus Evil. It'll be out later this year, 2023. It doesn't specify when on the Steam page, but these are the same people who did Wintermoor Tactics Club, along with Almighty Kill Your Gods and First Class Trouble. And in my little bit of time that I've had with it, it is very, very evident that it is still in development. Now, there's some pros and some cons to this. We want to get into the good stuff first. The good things are I really, really dig the art style. They did an excellent job of kind of capturing that kind of tumultuous, just all is in despair, but you're trying to find the way and you're trying to figure out what's going on and what swallowed up this town and all these other things. And to be clear, the only humans in the game that I've seen so far are your characters. Everybody else is like fish folk, bird folk, and everything and whatnot. I really want to call out the fact that they nailed the idea of, oh God, what's happening, kind of like that eclectic horror without leaning face first into Lovecraft. And that's really hard to pull off because a lot of times people will get into that type of horror genre and it always has to lean face first into, I said face first again, but that's okay. It always has to lean into that need for tentacles and everything is eldritch and whatnot. It's not quite the case here, and it's really refreshing because as someone who does play a lot of those games that wind up being absolutely covered in tentacles, it's nice to see that we can explore that kind of cerebral horror style without having to be like, okay, so Lovecraft. So kudos to that. I also love the color palettes that they're using here because, for the love of God, you can make something brownish without having to be everything covered in mud. So they did a really nice aesthetic with all of the kind of very autumny, very muted, but still notable colors. And the soundtrack is really, really nice. It captures all the things I'm describing about the aesthetic in a nice little bow tied on top package to give you that feel of, okay, we're wandering the forest, we probably shouldn't be, but we are definitely wandering the forest and we are doing stuff we shouldn't be. So there's 3 playable characters. In this build, I think it's intentional that you can only play the one character. Either that or else I need to get good and I can unlock the other ones, but we'll see as time passes. But there are 3 distinct playable characters, and they all have their own unique style, their own unique way of playing the game, their own unique mechanics, and I think that that's super duper cool because I love a good pro tag that is versatile. I hate having to play the same one over and over. That's one of the aspects of the game that reminds me a lot of Slay the Spire, where you have the 3, 4, 3, I don't remember because mods take over your life after a bit, but you have the 3 separate characters that you can play, and even though the core mechanics of the game is the same, where you play your cards and stuff happens and you kill the things, those characters individually operate very, very differently. And I want to take that to lean into the gameplay conversation for a little bit. So this advertises itself as a deck builder roguelike, but I do have to challenge that ever so slightly because usually when you say deck builder, you're thinking about decks of cards. So we see this with Slay the Spire, we see this with Across the Obelisk, and there's many others out there where you have to build your deck of cards in order to make better plays, better combos, better setups. And as you play through the game, you're going to fall on your face a bunch, but you'll still open up those cards permanently to make better decks to start out with. Well, in Tamarak Trail, instead of a deck, you're using dice. And the way that your abilities activate is with each face of the dice, which I think is actually very, very cool and a very neat way to stand out from the roguelike deck builder genre. Because instead of having to just shuffle through your deck and hope that you pull enough cards or pull the right card, now you have all your abilities available to you at all times because you have the dice, and you just have to hope that you roll on that ability, which kind of gets into its own gameplay loop funness and issues, but we'll get to that when we get to the con side of the conversation. So the dice are going to be your main way of playing the game, and you throw the dice, and what's really nice about that is there's a mechanic within this for the abilities that allows you to flip the dice on play. So there's a move in here that I really like right now where you get to hit all enemies with 2 damage and you flip the dice to the left. And when you flip it to the left, whatever is on that face is available for you to play, which is super cool if you have something that's like, oh, I get to do damage and now I'm going to put on defense, or I get to do damage and then I can do more damage, or my current flavor of choice, which is doing damage and then setting up dots for damage down the road in the battle. Now, you can't just throw the dice freely, willy-nilly, and just do whatever you feel like. All of these use what's called resolve in order to spend points to use the abilities. And resolve is one of those cases where it's underneath your character. On these screens, you'll see that I'll have something between 25 and 30 resolve, give or take, depending on where I am on the map. And the resolve is how you do moves. The resolve is also kind of like your HP buffer. Think of it as like your shield before the actual shield. And if you run out of resolve and take damage, then you'll actually lose heart damage. And my character has 5 hearts to start out with. So as long as you have resolve in your bar that can soak up the damage that's coming at you, you'll never take character damage. Think more like Magic the Gathering when you have to tap a card and decide, okay, who do I want to attack? Because a lot of cases you have to attack your front lines, all the BS that's in front of the player before you can just attack the player, unless it explicitly says, nope, this attacks the player. Luckily, we don't have that in this game. That would make this very, very frustrating, I think. But nonetheless, you still have to go through all of that resolve before you actually take damage. And the same is true for your enemies. Early game enemies are very, very soft, very, very squishy. They have like a staggering 12 resolve, and your vanilla move that you get does 5 damage, and you get 2 dice. So right away, you can do 10 damage to resolve. They'll regain that too, and they won't be able to keep up with you. You can kill them in 2 turns if your rolls go in your favor. This also leads to a lot of status ailments and buffs that are really cool. Things like exposed, doing double damage. You can stealth, you can dodge. All the stuff that comes with an RPG. And again, I really think that the dice mechanic is unique in that aspect, because we're used to seeing our full hand and our full spread in front of us. But when you have dice that are rolled, you have those 2 or 3 moves and that's it. Another thing I want to highlight is that the character that you have, they each have a special move. The one that I'm playing has a special move where once per match, I can gain 5 resolve. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, but you only do it 1 time per match. And if you're smart with it, you can start planning out things like, oh, I only have 6 resolve, and for everything I want to do, I need 11 resolve. So let me go ahead and burn this move that takes 2 resolve, another move that takes 3 resolve, and then I can use my super, get all of that back, and now I have plenty to do the final move that might take a staggering 6, and then soak up some of the damage that's coming my direction, provided I haven't melted something into the floor. Another thing that I kind of want to touch on is the bounce mechanic. And the bounce mechanic is based on how many times your dice hit each other and then continue to roll. Every bounce adds 1 additional resolve point in order to use that ability, but some abilities cannot activate without resolve. There's one in there specifically where the amount of bleed that you inflict is dependent on the number of bounces that are done. You can also get an ability that you can do 4 damage just raw, but if bounces are there for every bounce, it's an additional 4 damage, which is really helpful against things like bosses, because bosses are going to come in with 30, 40, 50 resolve before you can even get to their heart damage, which is the most important thing that you need to get down. And they're going to be reaccruing their resolve every single time. So I think that the general gameplay loop that they have is really interesting, really, really cool, and definitely worth checking out. In terms of the economy of the game, as you can see here, you have your large sprawling map, and true to Slay the Spire style, true to Inscription style, you follow your dots, you pick your path, and you go about your day. If you go to a chest, it gives you a chance to get a core, which you can put into your dice, which upgrade your dice and give you bonus resolve, more damage. If it flips and takes a bounce, you'll get a bonus 5 defense, fun things like that. All the tents will give you 1 of your hearts back along with a bonus 5 resolve for your next match. And then the exclamation points are events. You can go through the events, pick your poison, decide how you want to handle things. Sometimes you get cookies, other times you get popped in the mouth. And there will be many times you're going to get popped in the mouth. It's a roguelike. Of course you're going to get popped in the mouth. The other aspect of the economy I want to talk about is the actual shop. And the shop is, in my opinion, the coolest part of the entire game. Because you go in there and just the way that it's drawn out is so so beautiful because you have all these very strange beings that are in there treating it like this is an everyday regular tavern or pub, and you're this human that just walks in and you're like, oh yeah, I guess I should buy stuff. And that allows you to buy an assortment of additional abilities to put on your dice. The last thing I want to bring up about this is you can go in and change up your abilities on your dice anytime that you're on the map, and your abilities do not deteriorate. You do not have a situation where, oh, I have abilities on all my dice and I only have 2 slots for bonus abilities. I literally was able to just hold on to everything, and it was great. It was wonderful. And when you get your third dice, you'll get a third dice after beating a boss. Every time you beat a boss, you get an additional die, and that gives you more capabilities on the playing field. You just have to be very, very careful because, again, your resolve functions as both your ability spend and your HP. So, yes, doing combos is absolutely fantastic and wonderful, but you still need resolve to absorb hits in the event that you do not actually murder people. Love the map, love how everything is laid out, love the music, love the aesthetic, and I really, really like the gameplay loop and what they're starting off with. But now we have to get into the cons. I do want to start this off by saying this is a development build. This is a beta build. This is not finished. It isn't complete. It's not complete. So please, please, please take all of this with a grain of salt and understand that down the road, there may be more adjustments, there may be more changes, there may be more features that we're just not aware of. But right now, it does have a handful of bugs. They're not necessarily things that will completely kill your game. I saw a couple of overlay issues or UI issues when I went to the shop. If you're going through too many things and you take a bit, then all of a sudden your abilities start overlapping and you can't read them anymore. And the music is wonderful until it magically stops. So there's issues with the music looping every now and again, but the nice thing is as soon as you go to another screen, you will get the music to cut back on. So it's not a permanent break. It is just for whatever reason. Sometimes if you're in battle, the music just goes on break. And then when you get back to the map, things are fine. There's a different track for the boss fights, and it's super cool, and it ramps things up. But even that kind of has a stop point that it just is very, very abrupt. And it kind of works still with the silence, but once you kind of have the music going, you want it to stay there. I did run into a couple of issues thus far. If you decide to play this, I'm not sure if it's coming out for Next Fest or not, but if you decide to play this, be wary of if you have a couple of ghosts to fight. That does break the game right now. Unfortunately, it breaks the game. I went into an event and I fucked around and found out I had 2 ghosts pop up and they literally did not do anything. I played my moves, I got started, and the game just stopped. So if you see that event, do not pass go, do not box those ghosts. Y'all know I would always say reach heaven through violence, punch God, and take no questions about it. But this is a case where you need to go ahead and bypass it. Do not try to do anything additional. Some of those bosses that show up at those events, by the way, are not messing with you, just as a FYI. I do have a small concern about the way that the map is done, because if you look at it, this map is huge and it has something like 4 bosses on it total. I've been able to get up to the second boss with little to no issue, and then after that I start kind of getting hammered and beat up. But I am kind of worried about the length of an expected loop because of that. Because in all of these games, there's a kind of delineated space where, okay, this whole section is what you're going to do with a boss, and then we will give you the opportunity to just hard reset your face and then go into the next area. This right now is one massive map, and I hope that that is not the intent for the full final build, because it feels kind of arduous and it feels kind of long. My very first run took me about an hour and 20 minutes, and that's when I died to the second boss. I will be earnest in saying when I'm playing a roguelike, I want my runs to take an hour and a half at the maximum, at the absolute maximum. The only time I've really made an exception for that is with Darkest Dungeon 2, because even though I will not get a full run in an hour and a half, I can very confidently say, oh, I got to the end of an area, I can exit here, and when I come back tomorrow, I will pick up like nothing happened. And this right now does not have particularly great saving functionality. It's there, but you may lose some of your data in the process, and you may get set back a fight or two. And this is especially egregious when it comes to an event, because if you try to save after you've done an event, there's a non-zero chance that that event will reset and you will get a different event. So I will say your RNG calculators are working. That's you got that going for you. The last thing that I wanted to highlight that I'm kind of wondering about and I'm kind of a little concerned about is I really hope that it is not going to be locked to just a single individual character for your entire playthrough. With the way that this is kind of panning out right now, it definitely could stand to have a bare minimum of at least 2 bodies on your team against however many bodies on the opposition, because having just that one person with that one resolve bar in the hopes that you can get through everything, there's challenge and then there's a twinge of frustration. And there were a couple of fights in my time that were frustrating. There's one that I don't know if I'm going to put it in this video or not, as I'm making the audio individual of it, but I'll at least talk about it. There was one fight in particular that stands out to me for this, where this guy had 20 resolve, I had 25, he had 4 hearts, I had 5, and we just turtled for probably the better part of 15 minutes. And okay, that's exaggeration, but it was still about 10. But nonetheless, I don't want to spend 10 minutes on a fight that is not a boss fight. And that's really all there is to that. Like, it just feels stiff in places, which is then what leads into my cons about the combat is, like all roguelikes, it is RNG driven. It is RNG based. So there will be times where you go to throw your dice and you will get 3 defense runs, even though you need to start working on the resolve of that guy in the back who has 20 resolve. That is exactly what I ran into, is that I just kept rolling defense runs, and you only get 3 re-rolls, and it's not quite clear if these are 3 re-rolls per segment up to a boss or if it's per entire playthrough. Because if it's 3 re-rolls per playthrough and you expect people to get through 5 bosses, that is exceptionally rough. That is exceptionally rough, especially when you add in the fact that I can do a super every single fight. So I think that that may be something that we want to go back and tweak a touch, think about it a little bit and say, hey, maybe we should give these like 3 up until the boss and then refresh it guaranteed, or something to that effect. I do think that what they have right now to start off is very sturdy. I cannot say that I did not have a good time. I did have a good time. But the kind of summation that I have for Tamarak Trail is, it is a very fun game. It is a very interesting and refreshing take on the roguelite, whichever one you want to say, genre. But in the spots where it gets a little rough, it is very, very rough. It's one of those situations where it is not that bad until you see it, then it is extremely bad. But I think that this still has plenty of time to get polished up. I think this has time to tighten up and make some final decisions, and I'm looking forward to what they do with the final build. I'm going to add it to my wish list and keep an eye on it. So again, this was Tamarak Trail coming to you from Versus Evil, and thank you so much for the key. It is greatly appreciated, and I'm looking forward to your final product. So yeah, that covers it for the review. The rest of the video is for the long-time wine cellar members who probably have been wondering where the hell I've been. I will be very honest in saying, if you're new here, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Watch me on Twitch. I stream twice a week, playing video games of this degree and doing all types of fun stuff and talking about nonsense. And you can very earnestly and honestly you can just stop the video here. The rest of it's just me explaining why I haven't done reviews. Because if you're new here, this is brand new. So, cheers to you. Alrighty then. Yeah, but no, for real, like and subscribe to my stuff. So yeah, I think Tamarak Trail is pretty solid. It's got a really good foundation. I think it's a really interesting take on the deck builder genre, because no tea, no shade, as a deck builder and roguelike girly, there's a lot out there. There's so many out there. And it is really, really hard to differentiate yourself amongst the crowd. But I also wanted to take a moment to talk about why haven't the reviews been happening? And it goes like this. I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet, which means I'm going to fail it miserably. For those of you who are unaware, I lost my job at Tiltify back in April of 2022, and I am very good at like hiding my emotions, and I went into a pretty shitty depressive spiral. I went into a really bad one. I was unemployed officially for 4.5 months, and it was in August of 2022 that I got picked up. And even then, the job that I got picked up by held me for 10 months on a contract. So it was a full, roughly 14, 15-month period there where I was very unsure about what I was going to do about income, and then specifically if I was going to maintain that income. Even at this point, now that I'm full time, I'm still very terrified of waking up one day and being like, you're fired type of thing. But it was just a really, really rough period because those of you who have been around for at least a year or more know that I'm a very busybody person. And there's someone out there who's going to make like some just data point about how that has to deal with capitalism and all that. And the thing is, I've always just liked being busy. I like having stuff to do. I like being involved with things. I like planning. I like organizing. I like setting up stuff. I like giving feedback. I like doing all of those things and just working with people in some way. And when you go from having 2 to 3 gigs that allow you to do that to having none in the span of like a 2 week period, it is a very, very terrifying time. I think I probably went into one of my worst depressive spirals I've ever went into. My godmother tried to be, not godmother, my stepmother. My stepmother tried to be encouraging and being like, think of it as like a vacation. And I was like, yeah, except for vacations don't pay my rent. So I appreciate the sentiment, but I need a job. And I kind of saw this manifest when I started going into old habits I had in my college days, because when I would get really depressed in college, I noticed that I would just binge on video games. And I knew it got bad when I walked out of Dragon Quest XI with my platinum trophy at, I think, 112 hours. And full transparency, excellent game. 10 out of 10. Fucking go play it if you're a JRPG enjoyer. But doing that in the span of like a week and some change, I don't recommend it. That is probably not the best thing. The same thing kind of happened with Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. I got it on Black Friday. I was done with it and platinumed it in 2 days. So it was we were deep in the dark place there for a second. But I'm doing much better. I'm feeling much better. I am happy and love my job and enjoying the things and stuff. And many of you are probably like, why won't you like mention it and all these other things? Well, it's explicitly because I want to kind of keep those things separate from what I do for content creation. I am open and willing to talk about it when I'm live 100%, but for recorded content like this and whatnot, I do still want to be the home of Pleasantly Twisted, the headmistress of the wine cellar, which might be getting a rebrand soon actually, because I don't really drink wine like that anymore. Like that's how far out of the depressive circle I've become. Is I finally got my ass back into the gym, and I'm being safe. Don't worry. You don't have to worry about whether or not I'm like out here raw dogging a bunch of weightlifters and all that stuff. My gym half the time has like 3 people in it maximum. But I got back into the gym. I've been working out again. I've been changing my eating habits and all that stuff. And I, at some point, just kind of gravitated away from wine, which is very bizarre, very weird. Because I have like 7 bottles in the house and I haven't had the interest in drinking them. So we might still be the wine cellar, but we might also become the tea house. I don't know. I'm not sure, honestly. Because it's interesting. But we might just stay the wine cellar, because if you need red and white wine recommendations, I've got you. So, yeah, that's where we are. Uh, I'm happy to be back entirely. I'm happy to be back in the full PT form. And hopefully, some of these poor backlog reviews I've had. Oh, yeah, by the way, during that depressive stint, I had like 6 keys come in that I literally am supposed to do reviews for all of them. And now these games are out and stuff. But I guess it's better late than never. But I also don't like breaking commitments, so I'll probably be making some more of those here soon, TM. Thank you again, as always, to Perpetual Noob for saving me from having to actually learn how to video edit. Y'all, I did like 2 videos, and I was like, no, this is for the birds. I'm going to just pay Noob to do it. So always, 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 always thank you, Noob, for handling that for me. And make sure, everybody, that you like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you're spreading the word that, hey, there's this really cool gender flux person that does reviews on indie games. And I think I want to try and do this a little bit more regularly, because I think I want to call it something like the Sunday Quick Bites or the Sunday Snacks. Games that you can sit down on a cozy Sunday when you wake up at 10 and you have like your hot cup of tea and say, I want to waste my day. I wonder if there's something I can do with that. And I'm going to try and help fill that void. So, yeah. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around next time.